For years, our barbershop has had a massive problem. I mean, not unlike any other barbershop, okay? So Saturdays, Sundays, we had lines out the door, and then on top of that, we still couldn't keep up with the amount of people that were trying to come in and get a haircut. So we were turning away money every single day on the busy days, right? But then you got days like at our shop that, like Tuesdays, for example, or Wednesdays, where the barbers are just like staring at the wall. So we decided to test something that was a little controversial. We introduced Uber style surge pricing for haircuts. So we ran this experiment for 6 months, and the results completely shocked us. And that's what I'm going to cover in today's video. And if you guys don't know who I am, my name's Alex. I own a barbershop. We've got a couple locations in Jacksonville, Florida. We do well over $1 million in revenue per year. And we see around 2,000 clients a month. And we did this test for 6 months. And I purposely waited to make this video so that I could have concrete data to share with you guys about what exactly the results of the tests were. And that's what we're going to cover. So today we're going to cover in this video, what is surge pricing? What exactly was the goal? Like, why did I want to test it in the first place? How I set it up in my shop. We're going to cover the results, like what actually happened during this test. And then I want to cover the good and the bad. And then finally, my verdict of, do I recommend people do this? And I think the results will surprise you. Okay. So let's talk about first, like, what is surge pricing? Okay. And why did I want to test it? But first we'll talk about what it is, because we need to be on the same page here when we're talking about this. So if you guys have ever used apps like Uber, Lyft, and even like airlines, I mean, this is starting to become, I think, more common. But sometimes if you are going on an app like Uber, for example, you will go there to try to request a ride. And depending on the time of day or how many drivers they have on the road, they might actually charge more for that. And I believe that's just to entice more drivers to get on the road, because there's not enough demand. So it's basically a supply and demand thing. Our software has had this feature for a while, and the software we use is Zenoti. In my opinion, it's one of the best softwares on the market. And I wanted to test this feature because I was basically trying to avoid raising prices. So I wanted to see, like, can we just charge more when we're busy? I've never seen a barbershop do this. I've never even seen a salon do this. So this is one of the benefits of following me, I guess, because, like, you know, I actually run a barbershop, and I test these things in my shop. And sometimes they work, sometimes they don't, but I share with you guys exactly what happened, and with the goal of, like, so you guys don't have to repeat the same mistakes that I did, right? This whole idea of surge pricing is actually, there's different ways you can call it. It's actually, I think, more helpful to think about it as dynamic pricing. I use surge pricing because that's probably the term that people relate to more. But it's actually called dynamic pricing in our software. And that's the term, or that's the general idea, is that the pricing isn't always the same. Because it's dynamic, it changes depending on the rules that you set up. So there's two ways that we could have did this in our shop, and then I'll explain the way that we actually did it and how we set it up. So the first way is that you can just charge more on certain days and certain times. So, for example, if you want to charge more, if you know that every Saturday and Sunday is busy, then you can charge more just on those days, right? Or, you know, if you want to have like regular pricing during the morning, and then in the evenings when guys are getting off of work and you know you're going to be busy, then you can charge more during that time. And the idea with this, at least for us, and we'll get into this in the next section, because we're trying to move people. We're not just trying to like make more money and be greedy. It's just like we're trying to level out the demand, because it sucks as a barber and as a barbershop owner when you have a fully stacked, fully booked day on like a Saturday and Sunday, and then you got the next week on Tuesday or Wednesday, you're gonna have people just sitting around doing nothing, and it's like, where were all y'all on Tuesday and Wednesday when we actually needed you? So we wanted to see, can we shift some of those clients by charging more on the days that we're busy. So that's one way you can do it with the dynamic pricing. You can charge more on specific days or specific times. So one of the pros of doing this is that it doesn't change. Like it's very transparent. You can just tell your clients, like, this is our normal price, but if you come in on this day or during these times, it's more. By the way, restaurants have been doing this for a really long time. They got happy hour, they have a lunch menu, right? So this is not like an uncommon thing. Like, and if you start to pay attention, you'll start to see like a lot of businesses do this, right? It's just not common in our industry, right? But I wanted to test it. So for better or for worse, I've just never really been afraid to test something that's never been done before in our industry. And if it works, well, then we got an advantage over the other people that are too scared to try. And if it doesn't work, well, it's like, all right, well, we tried it, but it only has to work once. That's kind of like my mindset with these tests, is like, we could try, 100 different things, but only one of them really has to work to take our business to the next level, right? So like an example of that, I know I'm getting off track here, but an example of that was memberships, all right? Like, nobody in our city does memberships. Memberships for barbershops in general aren't super common yet. But it's people like me and others that are willing to try these things and willing to lose money that are basically paving the way for the rest of us to say, like, oh yeah, maybe this does make sense. And I can tell you right now, memberships absolutely make sense to offer at your barbershop. But okay, so back to the dynamic pricing. So a pro is that it's very transparent. Your clients just know that if they don't want to pay more, then just come in on a different time when we're not busy, right? But one con of charging more on specific days and specific times is that, what if that client can't come in on a different day and time? So there's some clients, and I'm sure it's the same at your barbershop, there's some clients that can't come in on any other day. They have 1 day off a week, 2 days off a week. Like, it has to be on Saturday or it has to be on Sunday. They can't adjust their schedule. So I thought about it like, so we're kind of punishing those guys, because maybe they want to come in on a different day and time, right? But they can't because their work schedule won't allow for that. And even if they rebook for in the future, they still have to pay more. So the other way you can set up dynamic pricing or surge pricing is it's truly dynamic, right? Where you can set it up like Uber, where as soon as you hit a certain percentage booked, then the system automatically starts charging or adding to the price. Right. So the good thing about this is that it can capture that extra revenue on any day, right? Because we might get a random Tuesday that ends up being fully booked, so random Wednesday, right? So then if we have this set up, which is what we ended up doing, where it's truly dynamic and it starts raising the price as soon as we get to a certain percentage booked, then it doesn't matter what day it is. It doesn't matter what time it is. If we get busy, we start making more money, basically, right? So we can capture that extra revenue on any day, on any time. And then it also encourages clients to rebook, because if they book before we get busy, then they don't have to pay that extra price. And I'm a big fan of doing anything that encourages the behaviors you want, both from barbers and from clients. So that's why I decided to go with strategy number 2 of having truly dynamic or surge pricing, is because it does reward the behavior of getting clients to rebook or pre-book before we get busy. And it makes that conversation really easy. Like, if a client got upset during checkout, like, why is it more? Then you just be like, well, it's because we were already busy when you booked, but just so you know, you can avoid this fee by rebooking your next appointment while you're here. And some people did that. So one of the cons of having it dynamic, constantly changing basically, is that clients really never know when it could be more. So although it was very clear on our website, like it would add that extra fee, like a surge fee or whatever, I forgot what we called it, but people would know, right? And sometimes I would see, because our system shows us on the calendar, like when somebody's in the process of booking. And sometimes I could see when somebody started the booking process, and like, for example, I was already like 90% booked and they were trying to book with me. And then they probably saw that extra fee and they were like, oh, never mind, and the booking went away. So they didn't finish it, basically. So that's the con, is like clients can't really see your schedule. All they can see is the openings. So they really never know when is it going to be more. So naturally, you can see how that might frustrate clients. But so now I want to talk about the goal and how I set this up in the system. So I had a few goals, which is basically I wanted to try to figure out a way with the dynamic pricing, the surge pricing, to increase our barbershop's revenue, but mainly to try to balance out the demand, to try to shift some of those clients from our busy days to our slower days, which will level out our demand across the week, and it wouldn't be so lumpy to where we had, Tuesdays and Wednesdays being like kind of quiet, and then we're just slammed and turning away business on Friday, Saturday, Sunday. That sucked, right? And it's a common problem, I think, with a lot of barbershops. But like, I try not to just accept what the standard is in our business. Like, my goal, my job is to try to figure out how do we fix that problem, right? And so this was my attempt to do that. So we started surge pricing in July of 2025. And we did it all the way through to December of 2025. So a solid 6-month test. So plenty of data for me to share with you guys exactly how it worked. Now, how did I set it up? Because this is also going to answer your question of how much do you charge extra on busy days. So we use our system called Zenoti, right? And we turned on this feature, and I had to work with them to set this up, but it's called dynamic pricing. And whenever we set it up the second way I told you guys about, to where it could change depending on how busy we were that day, not on specific days and times. That's another way that's more simple, actually. But we decided to go with, it goes based off our utilization, not off specific days and times. So the way we set this up was there was two triggers. So whenever a barber got to 80% or more booked, then that particular barber's price starts to increase, and it went to a maximum of 10% above the base price. And we could have changed any of these intervals. For example, like I could have went with 70% booked. I could have went for up to 20% above the base price. And at the time we were charging 45, so 10% would be the max that it could go up to. It ended up being like $49. Like $49.50, but it went to $49. It also triggered when the barbershop, the entire location as a whole, got to 80% or more booked. So even if there was no individual barbers at 80% booked, if the entire barbershop was 80% or more booked, then every appointment booked after that would start to trigger that surge price. But I learned this after we started doing this. But basically what started happening was it doesn't just add 10%. This is at least the way Zenoti works. It doesn't just add 10%. What that does is 10% is the cap. So we started seeing basically like, okay, so our base price was 45, but then as soon as we get to 80% booked, then the next price might be, for the next appointment booked after that, might be like 46, and then 47. And then basically the busier we got, the closer it got to that 10% cap of the max that the surge fee would be. So there was two triggers, basically, to summarize, right? If an individual barber got 80% or more booked, or if the entire location got to 80% or more booked, then the surge price would trigger. Okay. And it would only apply to that barber's books if it was just that barber, or it would apply to everybody's if it was the entire shop. And again, the goal was to try to increase revenue, but really to try to balance out the demand. And so let's talk about now what actually happened. Okay, so let's talk about the results, because this was very surprising. It's surprising to me. So remember, the goal was, so I had to think about what metrics are we going to use to determine whether this was a good idea, which, by the way, is a really good strategy. Just that took me years to learn. Don't just change stuff for the sake of changing stuff in your shop. It's just always a good habit to have this question in your mind, which is, how am I going to know if this change was a good idea? So what I decided to do was I was going to look at a few different metrics, and I was going to look at the 6 months of data prior to the change, and then when the change happened, and then 6 months after. And then, so this is what this looks like. So so I looked at things like total client retention, because I wanted to see, like, is this going to piss off clients? If so, and it's enough for them to not want to come back, then we should see a drop in retention. That was the theory, right? Another thing I decided to look at was average ticket, because if the goal is to increase revenue, then if this surge pricing does that, then our average ticket should go up. Another thing that I wanted to see is do the barbers make more from this? Now, I know that they make more if revenue goes up, but specifically I wanted to see, does this affect their tips? Because I can see pretty easily if revenue goes up. The tips is something that I actually had to do a little digging to find out. But if clients are pissed off that they have to pay a surge fee, then in theory, this should lower their tips, right? At least that was what I thought. And then right in line with that is if we're pissing clients off by charging surge pricing, surge fees, then we would get negative feedback from that, right? So I also looked at feedback. And then again, I wanted to see, can we encourage clients to start planning their next appointment in advance so that they don't get hit with this surge fee? So in theory, if this was a good test, then our rebooking should go up, right? Because, okay, clients know if they wait till last minute and we're already busy, it's going to be more. So in theory, we should see an increase in our rebooking rate. And then finally, I decided to look at the number of clients per day, because if this surge pricing works, then we should start to see a decrease in the number of people coming in on the days where we're normally busy, like Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and an increase in the days that we are normally quieter, like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, right? So those are the metrics that I decided to look at to see if this was a good idea and whether we should keep doing it. So retention, average ticket, the barber tip amount, feedback, rebooking percentage, and clients per day. So it was like six or seven, right? All right, so I'm going to share my screen. So those of you that are on YouTube are going to see the full screen. If you're not on YouTube, then it's going to be off to the side here. Let's see. Let me figure out how to make this one. Here we go. All right, so it's going to be a little small if you're on YouTube, but there we go. All right, so if you're on YouTube, you can see my full screen now. Try to make it a little bit bigger for you guys. So I looked at 2 locations too, because we did this test for both locations, and these were the numbers. So did client retention decrease as a result of doing surge pricing? So did we piss off clients to the point where they didn't want to come back? Well, according to this, no. We saw an increase in both client retention and, at both locations, right? So this was our retention, our total client retention for January through June, and then July through December. So our retention actually went up at Southside. Our Riverside location actually saw an even bigger increase in client retention. So did we piss off clients with this? No. But another way we can look at that is feedback. So our average feedback, in clients can rate us from 1 to 5 stars. Our average feedback actually went up at Southside, and then it stayed the same at Riverside. So we did not, based on this, we did not piss off clients if we're just looking at how many people came back. And I think that's the single greatest metric you can pay attention to when it comes to being a barber or a barbershop owner is your retention. Because even feedback is not a good enough metric, I think, because not everybody leaves feedback. But if they come back to your barbershop and they spend money with you again, to me, that is the best indicator that they actually like your service because they came back and spent money with you again. Because we've had clients that have been coming to us for years and that have never left us a review on Google, ever. But they've been coming for years. So which one would you rather have? A perfect review rating or happy clients that come back for years? I'll take the high retention all day. So our average ticket, so remember, if this was a good test, then our average ticket should go up, right? This, I would say, was inconclusive because we did see an increase for our average ticket at one of our locations, but we actually saw a decrease at another location. So I don't think that is a good enough sample, a test to say like this was for sure a good idea if the goal is just to increase revenue. One thing that I, honestly was not surprised about, but another measure of whether clients are happy is your tip amount, right? Because if clients are truly happy with the service you provide, not in every case, but in many cases, especially if you're, in the American culture where tipping is normal, usually barbers that have high retention also have high tip amounts. Those things usually go pretty close together, right? So, and this is just credit card tips. I don't know what the cash tip looks like, but most of our clients pay with credit cards. So we did see an increase in both locations in the average tip amount. So because of the way our tips are set up, this is a tip for barbershop owners, by the way. If you want your barbers to make more money like instantly and without costing you anything more as a barbershop owner, then one of the easiest things you can do is to make sure that your credit card tips on your POS system is set to be percentage based. Because then whenever you do a price increase, or if your barbers are really good at selling products, they're automatically going to see an increase in their tips because their clients are, in a lot of cases, hitting just one of the default options. So they'll hit, in our case, it's set up to 25, 35, 45%, or they can hit custom, or they can hit no amount. A lot of guys just hit one of the things that pops up on the screen, but we don't force them to. Like they can hit custom or they can hit no tip. But I instantly saw an increase in my barber's tips just by making sure that the tips were set to percentage based and that they were including the total, like the products and everything, right, in the tip amount. And also by adjusting the tip amount percentages. So like they used to be, I think, 10, 15, 20%, and then we raised it, and now they're at 25%, 35, and 45%. So one of the easiest ways to give your barbers a raise, and that doesn't really cost you anything except some credit card processing fees, is to just play with those tip percentages on your POS system. So we did see an increase in both locations in the barber's tip amounts. So that was a good thing, right? We were happy about that. We did not see an increase in the rebooking percentage. So in both cases, the rebooking actually went down. And that's one thing that I will say I'm not good at. We need to get a lot better here because rebooking is one of the most important things that you can do to influence how busy you are, and ultimately probably a better idea than charging more on when the days that you're busy is just get better at rebooking. And I have a whole course on rebooking in my community. So we try to encourage our barbers to do this. And the way their pay now is set up is directly tied to this, right? Because that's how important I feel that this is. And we'll get into that later. And then this is the number that I have the least confidence in because the number of clients that you see per day can get greatly influenced by the number of barbers that you have on your team. So we saw an increase basically in every single day that we track. And again, this is for 6 months. We saw an increase in the number of clients that we saw for every single day, right? Including the days that we were trying to kind of slow down with the surge pricing. So those are the results of, like, in terms of the number, as far as like what actually happened. So now I just want to talk to you guys about, kind of what we learned from this. Okay, so you guys saw that like it did not slow our busy days down. In fact, we just got busier all around, right? Which is great. But it just not a good sales pitch for surge pricing, because if the idea is you're trying to slow it down on the busy days, then for us, like, that didn't work. We did see an increase in revenue, but the average ticket was just inconclusive. Like, one location saw an increase, the other one actually saw a decrease. Did we piss off clients? Based on what I just showed you, no. Like, our retention actually got better after doing surge pricing. And this is like our real numbers. Like, this isn't my opinion. This is like what actually happened in 6 months. I didn't do this for like a week. I did this for 6 months at my shop. Okay. And then just a quick disclaimer too, like, some of the things I couldn't track, like, for example, like, whenever you make booking more complicated or harder, you usually, in my experience as a barbershop owner, what that normally means is you're going to see an increase in phone calls. All right, so I didn't track that stuff because I think clients started to realize after a while that if they try to book online, it would add the surge price. But if they called us, and they could get around it, because when we booked it on our end, it didn't add the surge fee. So I don't know the number for sure, but I would be willing to bet that during this time that we were doing this surge pricing, that we probably had an increase in phone calls that are higher than average of clients trying to get around it. That also happens whenever we've done, like, you have to put a card on file or you have to pay a deposit, your phone just going to ring more, right? Because a lot of clients don't want to do that. Some clients are totally cool. They're like, yep, I get it. That makes sense. But some people are be like, fuck that. I'm just going to call them and do it. So you really, like, a lot of times in the barbershop, you just trade problems. You never really solve a problem. So yeah, you can reduce your no-show rate by forcing people to put cards on file or having them pay a deposit. But what you're going to create a different problem, in my experience, where now your phone's going to ring more because people don't want to put their card information on the website. Some people will, but a lot of people are just going to call you and try to get around it. So in a lot of times in the barbershop, it's like, which problem would you rather have? Right. And our no-show rate is less than 2% now. So we figured out how to decrease our no-show rate without even doing cards on file, right? Or deposits. So, all right. So let's talk about, like, what I think, whether you should do this or not when it comes to the surge pricing. Basically, I don't think it's a good idea. So I decided to turn this off in I think I waited till New Year's Eve, and then and then the shop closed for the final, the last haircut of 2025 was done. And then I think a few hours later, I went into the system and I turned it off. And the reason why is, although our business did benefit from this change, what I learned from this is that our clients were less price sensitive than I thought. I thought that, because I was trying to avoid doing a price increase. I knew we needed to do one. I was trying to put it off. I was trying to optimize every other part of the business, and that was going to be the last thing that I did. And this was kind of like a baby step in that direction. So I think that surge pricing, dynamic pricing is maybe good to test. Like, do your clients care about, a 10% price increase? In my experience during this test, most people didn't even notice, and some people didn't even care, and some people even agreed with it. They're like, yeah, that makes sense. I see a lot of businesses doing that. So this test taught me that our clients, which were already like one of the more expensive barbershops in our area, it just taught me that like most of our clients don't give a shit about a 10% price increase. So that was a good thing, because we did end up raising our prices here in February. We did that. But I wouldn't have felt as confident if I hadn't have done this test. So you can do this if you want to test whether your clients are going to care about a price increase. But honestly, I think it's better to just do a flat increase across the board, because then, every haircut pays that and you make even more money, right? And what I decided to do instead was kind of the next evolution of this, which is that we created a level system for our barbers and our barbershop. So it's kind of like the same thing, but a little bit different in the sense that like it's on the individual barber, and they have to, based on their performance, have to earn the right to charge more. So we have a level system in our shop now for our barbers, where based on their individual performance, if they get to a certain level, they can charge more than the base price. And that is basically, in a way, supply and demand pricing, right? Because I think there's only two scenarios where you should raise your price. The first scenario is where your business needs it. You're not making enough profit, or you're losing money, or you just want to make more. But like, that's the first scenario. The second one is supply and demand, right? So if you're making enough profit, but you're still busy, then now I think you're in the next kind of tier, which is supply and demand. Now you have to think about charging more because you're too busy. So that's basically what our level system rewards, is the barbers that have high retention, that are just in high demand. Basically, there's some other numbers that we track, but that's one of the most important things, is their retention. And if they're in high demand, like utilization, how booked they are, then and they stay there, then they level up, and at a certain point they get to charge more. And so they make more as a result of that, right? Because with each level, the amount that they earn increases. And then if they do get a pay increase and they charge more on top of that, then it's like a double raise, if you think about it. So we just started doing that like this year. So, this will be another test that I come back and with an update for you guys to see if it was a good idea. But so far, it's starting to really motivate the barbers, I think, the right ones. And they're going to start to make more money. And I think in a year from now, I'll have a solid idea of whether it makes sense to have a team where some people are charging more than the others. I'll report back and let you guys know what happened. But basically, I don't think it's a good idea in the long term to do this. I think, although with everything I just showed you guys, like, if you were just looking at those numbers, you would say like, well, you didn't piss off clients, you made more, so why would you turn it off? It's just because, me being in the shop, I hear these little conversations, about like, oh, what's that about? Did you guys raise prices? And I think clients value transparency. I think they want to know. I think they're totally fine with paying more. They just don't want it to be different every time, And this is just based on the things, because not everything you can measure is the key point. And this is why me being in the shop, I think, is a huge advantage right now. Is because if I was just looking at the numbers like that I just showed you guys, then I might have kept it going. But me being there, I kind of heard these little side comments and things that are happening during checkout that I'm like, you know what, maybe there's a better way. So I think it was a good learning lesson for us, but we decided to go in a different direction. So we did do a price increase, but then we also introduced a level system so that in the future, when barbers when they earn it, and they get fully booked and they stay there, they get to charge more, right? So it's kind of the surge pricing or dynamic pricing 2.0. And if you guys don't know how to charge to begin with, because I made this post in my community where people put their booking links, and I kind of expected this, and I'll probably make a video on this, but like, I think a lot of barbers are guessing when it comes to pricing, and they're just, or worse, they're copying the guy down the street who is also copying somebody else who doesn't know what they're doing. And there's only one right way to know how much you should be charging, and that's to sit down and do the math and figure out how much you need to charge in order to cover your bills and have a little bit of profit left over. If you haven't done that, then you are guessing, period, right? And so I can't tell you what your price should be, but I do have a course in my community that specifically covers that. It shows you exactly how to figure out for your barbershop what your expenses are and what you need to charge in order to pay your expenses and then have some profit left over, right? So if you don't know how to do that, then, I mean, you might go out of business, honestly, because like you have to be able to cover all your bills and have some profit left over. And by the way, profit to me means that's what you have left over after you pay yourself as the barbershop owner. Some people think of profit as this is what I made as the barbershop owner. That's not how I define profit. Profit is what the business made after everything is paid off, right? Because the business needs a paycheck too. Like, how long could you survive without a paycheck? Well, your business can't survive very long either. So your business needs to make a profit. Your business needs to get paid. So you need to be able to make sure you're charging enough so that your business can get paid. So hopefully, that makes sense for you. If you want to see, I made a whole video on pricing. I'll put it right up here somewhere so you guys can check it out. It's just the first part in the series that I made of my course that goes over pricing, but hopefully you guys find that valuable. And just to summarize, like, surge pricing, I think, is here to stay. But personally, I don't think I'll be doing it again. But now you know maybe this will help you avoid some of the same mistakes I did. So hopefully you found that helpful.